As world leaders gather in Poland, I want us to send a strong message to our government that we need them to go there and commit to stand up for our planet. But I fear that what we have in reality is a government fatally influenced by big business interests standing up for dirty oil and fracking companies which are carving up our planet for profit. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report just weeks ago made it so clear that we have just 12 years to drastically reduce climate emissions, just over a decade to stop global temperatures from rising to dangerous levels, until 2030 to head off the destruction of the ecosystem upon which we and every other creature on our planet depends. We need to bring forward all our targets now and stop messing around. Let's fix the areas where we've done the least so far. Let's shift transport from the internal combustion engine to being fueled by our own bodies, walking and cycling, and out of individual cars into shared transport, buses, trains and trams. Let's get on with sorting out fuel poverty with mass insulation and home improvements, sorting out the leaky, damp, cold homes so many of us have to live in, wasting heat, adding to climate change while costing us dear. And let's make renewable energy in our homes and communities the simplest thing in the world to plan, fund and develop. Our communities are ready and willing to do this. And none of this is hard. I mean, did I also mention that this Green New Deal will create thousands and thousands of worthwhile jobs? It'll keep areas, we need to keep areas dependent on current fossil fuels and dirty industries going, and we can do that with these methods. We need a transition plan that focuses on those areas, and we can really create the world that we want to do. I mean, the truth is we don't need rocket science to fix the climate, but we do need the will and the plan to get it done. And easiest of all, let's for pity's sake stop making it worse. Unfortunately, making things worse is what our government is mainly doing right now. It's building more runways, it's building more and bigger roads, it's forcing a new motorway through the middle of England, creating even more car-dependent communities all along its route. It's making this even worse by cutting buses in rural areas and towns across the country. It's cancelling new renewable projects like the Swansea Tidal Lagoon, and it's clamping down on onshore wind power. It's stopping small renewables from collecting feed-in tariffs. It's forcing fracking on our local communities against their will. And it's arresting peaceful protesters at fracking sites and those who want to highlight their failings by bringing protests to their door here in London. Sorry, that was a really long list, but the Conservative government is appalling. They told us that they would be the greenest government ever, but I think we know now how cynical that sham of a claim was. Like Michael Gove's much photographed Keep Cup, their promises are empty. All of us have consistently been let down by the Conservative governments who have put their vested interests and their money first. But I have to say, we've also been let down so far by the Labour Party too. Last week was the 10th birthday of the Climate Change Act, 2008. It was a good new law. It was a revolutionary idea. It was hard fought for by campaigners like you and me in one of the loudest and biggest campaigns I've seen in my lifetime. I remember it well. The Committee on Climate Change has been effective in tracking our progress under the Act. It's been an independent voice when the government's failed, and it's them who've stood up and said to the government, we're calling you to account for refusing ever to do anything about car culture and reducing traffic, as a good example. But in contrast to this really good thing the Labour government did in 2008, we are also dealing with the legacy of another act they also passed 10 years ago last week on the same day. The Planning Act 2008 centralised major project planning, it took decisions out of the hands of local representatives, and it stopped climate change being properly considered. Its destructive legacy can be seen in many new and wider roads, gas pipelines, nuclear power stations and incinerators across the country now. These were decisions made while local voices and the impacts on emissions were sidelined and ignored under this Act. And the latest idea from the Conservatives is no surprise. They want to bring fracking into this centralised major planning regime to stamp even harder on the rights of communities to stand up for their areas and their climate. Labour's Planning Act was devised mainly in reaction to the huge protests and legal actions to stop their plans for a third runway at Heathrow. And I know many of you here today were like me at Climate Camp in 2007 when we stood up against these destructive plans. But the Labour government back then didn't want to give up on airport expansion, and today, sadly, this is still true. Labour in London may be very against Heathrow. They're against fracking too, but they're very against Heathrow, and this is all good. But the Mayor and the Labour colleagues I have on the London Assembly, they still back airport expansion at Gatwick. Now, the climate doesn't care which runway we build. It knows that no amount of new runway is compatible with stopping runaway climate change. And I hope we can change Labour politicians' minds on this. They love a lot of Green Party ideas. This is one I'm very, very keen for them to take up, because I do know that the Conservatives are a much harder sell. And I will always stand up and call out things that are wrong. But I want to stay positive now today, because the silver lining in the polluted sky is that time is not up. There's still a window, a small one, to turn the human record on climate change around. There is hope for the future, and that hope is the radical common sense ideas Green campaigners talk about every single day. And when I say hope, I don't mean optimism, sitting around wishing things were better. Hope is a call to action. The call to action that the Extinction Rebellion have heeded, the hope that they have given us. When protesters block roads to bring attention to the lack of action on climate change, when people rise up and say enough is enough and stand together, all ages, all backgrounds, because the one thing we have in common is our planet, that is hope. As the co-leader of the Green Party, I'm proud to lead the only party that never fails to put the environment as a firm bottom line in everything we do. We want to value not GDP, but what really matters. We're the ones who recognise that in all that we do, that we will either have a green, fossil-free future or no future at all. The solutions to climate change are not difficult, but what is difficult is convincing those in power to listen, which means we need to change who is in power. The fight for climate justice isn't easy, but it's the one fight which unites every living creature on this planet, and it's a fight which today we all say we will not stay quiet about. Thank you for being here.